I think we're good to go. All right. Okay. So, hi everyone. I am. Wait, hold on. Mr. Okay. Hi everyone. I am Mr. C, also known as Chiman Ruler 15 on the Discord server, where I'm one of the teachers. And today we are going to talk about pronoun cases. So in English, pronoun cases really just determine what function the pronoun has in a sentence. So, for example, like if the sentence, if for the subject here, let me type an example right here. He hurt her. So for an example like this, pronoun case tells us who's doing what in the sentence for pronouns. So here, he is the subject and her is the object. So hold on. Okay, so to make this easier to understand, I made this chart beforehand that shows you the differences between all the cases. But before I do that, remember that a pronoun in English is a word that replaces a noun. So if I put this here, let's see. So for example, the winner was he. Let me erase this.
He was the winner.
Yes, that too. Let me find. Okay. So yeah, as someone said, actually, why don't I just type that? He was the winner. There. Okay. So here, he is a pronoun that renames the noun winner. Who was the winner? He. He was the winner. So that's what a pronoun does. It renames a noun. So it takes the place of a noun, because if you were to make a story, you wouldn't use somebody's name over and over and over and over again. Like, let's say Chelsea went to the store and Chelsea, I misspelled Chelsea. Chelsea went to the store and Chelsea bought a dress, and then Chelsea went home. Let me erase this. Okay. So Chelsea went to the store and Chelsea bought a dress. Then Chelsea went home. Too many names right here. Too many. Because repeating somebody's name like that over and over again is quite annoying. Sorry about that. Okay, so here, repeating Chelsea's name over and over again gets rather frustrating and annoying to read. So that's why we have pronouns. So we could actually replace these two here with she. We could replace this one with she and this one with she. Chelsea went to the store and she bought a dress. Then she went home. So now the sentence isn't as annoying to read. So that's why we have pronouns. We use them to rename nouns, such as Chelsea. And if you remember, a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. In this case, the noun is Chelsea and she's a person. So that's what a noun and a pronoun. That's what a noun is and that's what a pronoun is. But of course, pronouns in English are actually declined. That is, and by declension, I mean when you decline a word, you're altering it based on the function it has in the sentence. Whether or not it's the subject or the object or whether it's possessive, anything like that. So Indo-European languages such as English, German, Russian, all that stuff, they tend to have cases with pronouns. But not all Indo-European languages have pronouns. I'm sorry, noun cases, sorry, noun cases. Not all of them have noun cases. English actually doesn't have any noun cases, not anymore. It used to, but not anymore. Now we just have pronoun cases, whereas German actually does have noun cases, although you don't alter the noun itself, just the article that comes before it. So, but in any case, if you're Russian, if you speak like Russian or German, this isn't really new to you. It's just a simpler case in English. So here we have 3 pronoun cases in English. Subjective, for subjects. Objective for direct and indirect objects, if you remember what those are. And possessive for things that own other things. Oops, let me just... Okay, sorry, someone said something in the chat? You've got quite an audience. Yeah, I do, actually. I actually do. Yes, hello. Uh, I'm sorry if I butchered this name. Mudathir? Hi, welcome to the lesson. Okay, so we have 3 cases, right? Subjective, objective, and possessive. Um, so in English, subjective, again, corresponds to the subject. So for example, the subject of this sentence would be, she went to the movies, right? The movie, I'm sorry, no. She is the subject of this sentence. She went to the movies. So in this case, the subjective case corresponds to the subject of the sentence. So in English, when you want the pronoun to be the subject, here's how you decline it. I, you, he, she, or it, we, you or you all, and they. So that's how you would mark the subjects for pronouns. Pretty straightforward. So for objects, for the objective case, let me erase all that. Okay. So for the objective case, we have me, you, him, her, or it, us, you or you all, and them. So, why did I erase all that? Let me not erase all that yet. Okay. So an example for the objective case would be when something is the direct object of a sentence or the indirect object of a sentence. So, for example, they, okay. They, or no, let me not do that. Okay, let's see. The librarian told them to be quiet. In this case, them is the objective case. In this case, them is the objective case. And because the librarian is the subject, so them cannot be the subject. The librarian told them to be quiet. So in this case, them is the indirect object of the sentence because they're receiving the action of being told to be quiet. So here we mark them in the objective case. And for a direct object example, we have, let's say, the baseball hit her. Yeah, let's say the baseball hits her. In this case, her is a direct object because, actually, I'm sorry. Let me correct what I said earlier. The indirect object is something, it's an object to whom or for whom an action is done, but the direct object actually experiences the action itself. So the baseball hit her. She is the direct object, her. Her is the direct object because she's experiencing the action of getting hit with the ball. And I'll provide more examples of direct and indirect objects in later. But I want to, go over everything here first. Let me erase that.
Can we say the baseball hit it?
Or the baseball hit it. You could say that too, as long as you make what it is clear in the context. Okay, and then we have possessive, which means it's just a fancy way of saying that you own something. So here we can mark the possessive in different ways. So mine, yours, his, hers, or its, ours, yours, and theirs. So to provide an example, let's say this. The television is his. The television is his because he owns the television. It belongs to him. So we use his here to mark the possessive case. Whose television is it? It is his. And I actually forgot to include one more example here. You can also have who, whom, and whose. I'll cover those in a moment. But yeah, that's another category of pronouns. So that's what the possessive case does. And to provide another example, this laptop is mine because I own the laptop. It belongs to me. And since it belongs to me, mine is in the possessive case. This laptop is mine. And I bring up German here because I want to compare the two languages. They're not really that different. See, in German, the only difference is that the objective case in English is actually mapped to two different sets of pronouns here, the accusative and the dative. The accusative corresponds to the direct object of a sentence. So here we have the direct object, whereas the dative case is for indirect objects. But in English, the objective case goes with both. It's mapped to both. But we do have the concept of a direct and indirect object. It's just that unlike in German, we don't map them separately. So we use the context to determine the difference, or sometimes prepositions, and I'll go into that further later. But just know that in English, the accusative and the dative combine to form one big objective case. So it's a little simpler than German in this regard. So you can see that the English pronoun case system is actually quite similar to the German pronoun case system. So if you speak German, then this should not be very hard for you. It should be really easy because you know this stuff. You just have to learn the different forms. So let me just go ahead and erase all that. And of course, the subjective case in English corresponds to the nominative case in German, and the possessive case in English corresponds to the genitive case in German. So again, not a really new system or anything like that. Erase all that. Take that out. No, don't erase that. Okay. You know what? Hold on. Okay. Okay. Put that here and put that here. And of course, there's this for the interrogative pronouns, pronouns that are used to ask questions, we have who, whom, and whose. And they're also declined. So they're not really any different. So let me just go ahead and save this snapshot. Okay, now I'm going to erase everything. I'm not really going to cover the German pronouns because again, it's a correspondence. You guys can see that, like for example, du corresponds to you, ihr corresponds to you all, and so on and so forth. Ich corresponds to I, mich corresponds to me, or mir corresponds to me, but you get the idea. Okay, let's erase all that. Okay, now let me talk about who, whom, and whose. So with these interrogative pronouns, you have, and actually, let me also point out one thing. There's also whoever, whomever, and whose, or is there whose ever? I'm trying to remember if there is. That's embarrassing. Who's ever? Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I would say there is. Okay. Yeah, like whose ever it is or stuff like that. Okay. Hold on. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Yeah. Just making sure that that's an actual word. Okay. Share the screen again. And okay. So let me explain who, whom, and whose, or whoever, whomever, and whosever. So again, who corresponds to the subject of a sentence. So who got a perfect score, oops, on the test? Who got a perfect score on the test? Who is the subject here? And for an example with whom did you invite to the party? Whom would be the direct object here, because it receives the action of it experiences the action of being invited. And then we have whose. Whose car is that? In this case, whose is the possessive, because we're asking who the car belongs to. So it follows the same pattern as the other pronouns. Regarding whoever, whomever, and whosever, they're really used the same way. The only difference is just that ever is attached at the end of the sentence. So at the end of the word, I mean, hold on. Okay, so as an example, whoever broke the window is in serious trouble. Whoever broke the window is in serious trouble. So here, whoever is the subject. Actually, this whole thing right here is the subject. It's a noun clause, because this whole thing here is a subject. And this here is the verb. But the point here is that whoever is essentially the central subject, and this is all the rest of this part right here. That's just the rest of the subject, but whoever here is the main part of the subject. Okay, so to whomever it may concern. I have an important message for you. Okay, so here we have whomever as the object of the preposition to.
Is whoever always singular?
No, it can be singular or plural.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so regarding who, whom, and whose, these could be singular or plural. That's actually a good point to bring up. Whereas the other pronouns are either singular or plural. And they can't be both. But these three right here, they can't be both. Okay. So again, whomever is the object of the preposition to. So it needs to be in the objective case. I forgot to mention that objects of a preposition are always in the objective case. So it's not just direct objects and indirect objects. You also have objects of a preposition. Okay, and then there's whoever, whosever. Whosever book this is, it is not written very well. So here we have whosever, which is like whose, but you know, the ever here just, I don't know how to explain the ever part here, but it's really just another way of saying whose. I guess to whosever here implies more a number of choices compared to whose, which implies like just one choice or whatever. But here, whosever is the possessive case because we're wondering whose book this is. So that's really all there is to that. I should also point out that whom is being used less and less nowadays. People don't really use it as much as they did in the past. Normally, people actually say things like, who did you invite to the party? Instead of whom did you invite to the party? And that actually sounds more natural to people. So whom is actually not really used very much in
Is it
casual.
dated?
Huh?
Is it dated?
Is it what?
Dated? I mean, obsolete?
No, it's not obsolete. It's just not common to use. So it's not obsolete. It's just people just don't say it that much anymore. What's obsolete is like the pronoun thou, and like for the subjective case, thee for the objective case, and thine for the possessive case. Because in English, you used to have thou, which is like another form for you. It's like the singular you, but we don't have that anymore. So this is actually obsolete. But whom is not obsolete. It's just not common to use. So that's the difference. Okay. So you'll really find whom in formal writing, but you won't find whom very much in speech unless somebody wants to sound a bit fancy, or unless it's an actual, like, unless it's a professional setting, then you might hear it. But other than that, you won't really hear it. Even I wouldn't say it very much. What was I going to? Okay. Hold on one moment. Oh, someone raised his hand. Okay. What was your question? What's your question?
Yeah, then using those things, it's not necessary for learning.
I'm sorry, what?
Also, if I don't learn, also, I mean, if I don't learn those things, it doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, I can't understand you. There's too much noise in the background. Okay, if you could type in the chat, that'd be great. Then I could understand what you're saying. Okay, what was I going to do? Okay, right. So I was going to talk about direct objects. Oops. Indirect objects. And, oh, hold on. and object of a preposition. So if you recall, the direct object is for objects that experience the action of something. So an example would be the professor chose me for the assignment. The professor chose me. So me here is the direct object because it experiences the action of choosing. Whereas the professor here is the subject of the action. And me is the object, the direct object of the action, chose. Okay. And then you have the indirect object. So he gave me $30. So here, the direct object isn't me this time. It is $30 because the $30 experiences the action of giving. But me, for me here is the indirect object because the action of giving is done for me or done to me. So that's the difference here because I'm not actually being given to someone else. I'm given something. So that's the difference here. Me is the indirect object this time because it's indirectly affected by the action of giving. And he is the subject here. Okay. You could also rephrase this sentence like this. He gave $30 to me. You could say it like that. And here, me would still be the indirect object. Well, both the indirect object and the object of a preposition to, but this is really just another way of phrasing that me is the indirect object of the action of giving. So you could say he gave me $30 or he gave $30 to me. And then there's, let me move that, the object of a preposition. They had a great time at the party without me. So here, this sentence actually doesn't have a direct object, an indirect object. It has a direct object, a great time, but it doesn't have an indirect object. And they is the subject, but without me here, me is the object of a preposition, and it's not the indirect object. So after prepositions, you must always use the objective case. So here the preposition is without. So whatever follows has to be in the objective case. Without me. Okay, so let me highlight that. So that's when you use the objective case. You can use it for a direct object, an indirect object, or the object of a preposition. Okay, let me erase all this. So before I continue, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes?
So say I'm planning on organizing a party and I'm speaking with someone and I say to them, I don't think this party is going to be a success. There might be just a few guests. In fact, I think it's going to be just you and me. Or it should be, in fact, I think it's going to be just you and I, or both work.
That's actually a really good question. I was going to get into that at some point, but I didn't know when. So that's actually a good point. So
Okay.
let's say it's going to be you and I versus it's going to be you and me. So these were your examples, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he actually made a good point here, and I was going to explain this at some point, but I was going to talk about something else first, but that's okay. So what he's saying here is I in this case correct, or is it me? And the answer here is, well, if we're going to be absolutely technical, you would say the first one, because I is what renames it, as well as you. I and you rename it. And remember, when you want, pronouns can, take the place of a noun. And in this case, we have what's called a predicate nominative, which renames the subject, essentially. So, like, for example, let's say it is I and versus it is me. I, in this case, is the predicate nominative because it renames the subject it, which is not compatible with me. But, again, this is kind of like the issue with whom. People would often say this one nowadays, it is me, and they would only say it is I if it's a really formal setting or if they want to sound fancy. But if we're going to be absolutely precise, you should use the I form, the I pronoun, because it renames the subject, and an object can't rename a subject. So to answer the question asked earlier, it should technically be this one. But people would more often say this one. So to summarize this, the first sentence is more precise, but it sounds quite formal. Whereas the second one is less precise, or I should say less technical. Let me use technical for this. Let's say more technically correct. It's less technically correct, but it sounds more natural. So you can see that you have a trade-off between formality and, hold on. You can see that you have a trade-off between formality and what sounds natural. But if I were to be, in a sense, descriptive rather than prescriptive, or, you could really say either. Either's fine nowadays. So I wouldn't say the second one is wrong. It's just, it's just a different use of me, because in the past you couldn't really say this, but now it's getting to be more and more acceptable to say this. So in a sense, neither is really wrong. It's just that the first one is more precise, but it just doesn't sound as natural.
So could you come up as pretentious if you use the first sentence?
In some contexts, yes. Yeah, if you say things like whom or like it is I or anything like that, you can come off as pretentious. So unless it's a really formal setting, I would just avoid talking like that. So that's actually a good question. Okay, so that's that. What was I going to? Okay, well, here. Let me stop sharing for a moment because I actually have some exercises that I want us to cover. Oh, actually, yeah, there are a few more things I wanted to mention. 2 more things, and then we should be fine for the exercises. Let's see. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about that's really important, but it's also similar to the whole issue with whom and using I instead of me. What I'm going to talk about right now is possessive gerunds. So, does anyone remember what a gerund is?
Adding ing to a verb.
Yes, but there's a bit more to it than that. You're close, but there's more to it than that. So it's really more like, you do add ing to a verb, that's correct. But here, the ing verb functions as a noun. So that's what makes it a gerund. So for example, swimming is my favorite activity. So here we have a gerund, swimming. Swimming is my favorite activity. Here we have an ing verb that's functioning as a noun in the sentence. And alternatively, ing verbs could be the object of a sentence, like the direct or indirect object of a sentence. So for example, he doesn't like running. So running is another gerund here because it's the direct object of the action doesn't like. Or you could say, for the object of a preposition, you could say, we were talking about climbing mountains. Here we have a gerund. Well, it's actually a gerund phrase because we have climbing and mountains, 2 words. So it's a gerund phrase here, but it can be the object of a preposition. In this case, the gerund climbing is the object of the preposition about. So that was just a review on gerunds. So what do I mean when we talk about a possessive gerund? Well, before I do that, someone said something in the chat. Okay, let's see. So what differs a gerund from a participle is that a participle is either a verb or an adjective. It's a verb that can function as an adjective, essentially. So, for an example of a participle, the dancing man was entertaining. Here, okay, so here dancing is a participle. It's not a gerund. It's a participle because it's functioning as an adjective. It describes man. So that's what makes it a participle instead of a gerund. It's not a gerund in this case. And of course, ing verbs can also be part of verb phrases. So, for example, we are cooking a big dinner. In this case, this is not an adjective. It's actually a verb that's connected to this verb. So it's 2 verbs that are connected to each other. So in this case, it's a participle, but it's not functioning as an adjective. It's part of a verb. So it's not a gerund either. Okay. So that's the difference I want to express. So now that you know what a gerund is, a possessive gerund is when you want to express that a gerund belongs to someone else. Like, for example, do you like my singing? So here, singing is a gerund because it's functioning as a noun. And we call it a possessive gerund here because it belongs to me, my singing. Do you like my singing? So that's what makes it possessive. And another example here would be her dancing was so beautiful. So in this case, dancing belongs to her. Whose dancing was beautiful? Her dancing was beautiful. So here we have a possessive gerund because the dancing belongs to her, her beautiful dancing. So that's what makes the possessive gerund. So why am I mentioning this? Because there are people who will say things like this. I appreciate you coming here versus I appreciate your coming here. So before I continue, I want to say that these two are technically correct, but they mean slightly different things. So does anyone know the difference between these two?
Maybe that one is just more formal than other.
That's part of it. But what I want to point out is that this is actually the more precise form to use, because when people say, I appreciate you coming here, they really mean I appreciate your coming here. And I say that because I'm not appreciating you in this instance. I'm appreciating the fact that you came here. You're coming here. So it's the action of coming here that I appreciate, not you, not you. You're coming here. That's what I appreciate. So that's the difference. Now, the first one isn't wrong, but again, it would mean I appreciate, oops. Let me move that.
So instead of liking the action, we need to like the action, not like the person itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference.
Okay.
But, you know, people will use the first one to mean the same thing nowadays. And there are other examples where people do things like this, such as like, let me say, me being here has nothing to do with the discussion. Versus my being here has nothing to do with the discussion. Okay, so oh, hi, Yusuf. Okay, so here, the first one is more common, but it's technically not precise because you don't use me like that. Because if you isolate the being here, take it out of the sentence, and then you just have me. But that's not quite right. because me can't be a subject. So it should be my being here instead of me being here, because being here belongs to me. So I use my. Okay. But again, people would more often use the first one. People would more often use the first one because it just sounds more natural. But it should technically be, or it should more precisely be the second one. But I wouldn't say that the first one is wrong in a sense, just not as, precise as the second one. So I don't want to say that this is wrong in a sense, just, because language changes over time, standards change over time, but, the second one is actually the more precise form to use. But you could really use either and people would understand you nonetheless. But there are a few contexts where, not using the right form could cause confusion. So for example, I don't like the woman standing over there versus I don't like the woman standing over there. So the difference here is that, well, if you just rely on the first one, which a lot of people would do, it's not really clear as to whether or not you don't like the woman or you don't like the fact that she's standing over there. But if you use the second one, it's clearer. It's not the woman that you don't like, you just don't like that she's standing over there. So if you use the first one, well, it's confusing. But if you use the second one, it's made clear that it's not the woman that you don't like, you just don't like that she's standing over there. So that's when the possessive gerund would be necessary. But of course, if you don't like that, you can just rephrase a sentence like this. I don't like that the woman is standing over there. So you could say it like that. And if that just sounds less awkward to you, and it does to a lot of people. And another example where this would cause some confusion is this. I resent them coming here versus I resent their coming here. So do you resent the people coming here or do you resent that they came here? So again, there's a key difference here. If you use the first one, it's ambiguous. But the second one makes it clear that it's not the people that you resent, you just don't like that they came here. So I would avoid using this one, or at the very least, rephrase the second one if you don't like the way that the possessive gerund sounds. So, oops, let me keep that there. So you could say, I resent that they came here. And that would sound better, at least better than the first example. Okay, so, but again, most of the time, using the objective case like that, like, them instead of their, or in other case, the woman instead of the woman's. In most cases, this doesn't cause confusion, but in a few cases it can. So just keep an eye out for that. But anyway, one last thing I want to talk about before we go on to the activities. Okay, so let me go back to whoever versus whomever. Okay, so going back to what I was talking about. But there's a key difference here between whoever and whomever. So consider the following sentence. To Okay. So here we have to blank cheat on the exam, you'll be punished harshly. Okay, so what do you think the answer is? Is it whoever or whomever? There's actually a key difference here. So you have to think about it. So a lot of people would say whomever. Because, you know, it to some it sounds more correct, and because to is a preposition, they're like, oh, let's just use the objective case. But that's actually wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because this is a tricky one. It's actually to whoever cheat on the exam. To whoever cheat on the exam, you will be punished harshly. So why is it whoever and not whomever? Well, let's think about it. First, let's just ignore for a moment the preposition to. Let's just ignore it. It doesn't matter at this point. So now you have just the clause here, right? It's just a clause. You have whoever and cheated and on the exam. That's just one big clause. Because remember, a clause has a subject and a verb. Well, usually. And you can see here that the subject is whoever and cheat on the exam is the verb. Well, the predicate, I should say. Or, you know, cheated is the verb and on the exam would be an adverb phrase. So here, we need to use whoever because, again, whomever can't be the subject. And since you have a clause here, you need to have a subject. But you can't have you can't use whomever because that's not a subject, that's an object. And remember, a clause requires a subject and a verb. So in this case, you need to put in a clause. Sorry, the subject pronoun, whoever. But then you're wondering, okay, well, but there's two. And didn't you say that, you know, if, you know, any pronoun that follows a preposition needs to be in the objective case? Yes. But you need to look at the bigger picture here because the object of preposition to here, let's take this out for a moment. The object of the preposition to here is not just whoever. It's not just whoever. It's actually whoever cheat on the exam. So it's that whole clause. And because a clause needs a subject and a verb, only whoever makes sense here. So in situations like this, if you take out the preposition to, then the difference between whoever and whomever should be pretty clear. But if you have a sentence like this, to whomever it may concern, like let's just say we have a sentence that starts with that, then whomever would make sense. Here, whomever would actually make sense. Because this clause right here, it may concern, it already has a subject, which is it. It is the subject. So whoever here can't be the subject. It is already the subject. So here it's just to whomever. That's really it's just that one phrase here, to whomever. So this whole thing here is one unit, and this whole thing here is another unit. So whomever is really the only thing that makes sense here, as it has to follow the objective case can only be has to follow a preposition. So any pronoun after a preposition, that's the object for a preposition, has to follow, has to be in the objective case. Okay, so that's why we use whomever here, but whoever there, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's what I wanted to mention. So be careful about the object of a preposition, because it can be, remember, clauses. Remember, a clause can be a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. And in the case of nouns, clauses can be direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of a preposition, or objects of prepositions. So just keep that in mind.